Why was it not destroyed with the rest of their fleet?
The humans were able to evade your ships, land on the sacred ring, and desecrate it with their filthy footsteps.
Alright, it is a very big one today. In a shocking move that nobody saw coming, least of all myself, soon turned out to only be 4 days. What am I talking about? Well, the new Stellaris open beta for patch 3.6 is already out. You can already get your hands on it. Now we're going to go through the latest dev diary today, which lists all of the massive changes coming in Stellaris 3.6. We are getting a brand new Federation type. We're getting a massive rebalance to the combat system, a massive rework. The aquatic trait has been nerfed. The shattered ring origin has been buffed. Common ground origin, the Federation starting origin, has had a massive change in the fact that you can now choose your starting Federation type. We're going to go through all of this and more today in this video. So without any further ado, let's dive in. Alright, so a large part of this dev diary, a large part of this content does focus on the new combat rebalancing experiment. There is some new information in here that you haven't seen or heard before, but if you are not interested in the combat rebalance, I will put a chapter in so you can skip ahead and find out more about the new Spiritualist Federation and all of the other things coming with Stellaris Orion, that is patch 3.6. But if I still have your attention and you do want to hear all about the combat rebalance and possibly some of the new information that I haven't actually managed to cover yet because it wasn't available until now, then I'm glad I have you around. So first off, they are talking about in this dev diary the scope and intentions and the goals of the combat rebalance. They want to decide what it was and what it was not. So they have decided, this is the devs, that the primary goals were to shake up the meta and improve general space combat while maintaining a limited scope. Provide benefits to having mixed fleet rather than just a uni-hull fleet, that is fleets made of only the same class of ship, be that destroyers or battleships, or probably battleships, let's be honest. And they also had to use the 3D assets that were on hand, improve counterplay and ship design options. Containing the scope of these changes was critical. This is intended to be a tightly focused fleet composition and balance change rather than a massive rewrite on how fleet combat works. They're also not touching ground combat at this time, much to the chagrin of many of you out there. What are the problems? Well, the problems identified are that Alpha Strike artillery battleships dominate the late game. They've added a bit of rock, paper, scissors when they improved strikecraft, but due to the way repeatable technologies interact with combat, eventually all that tends to matter is who has the longer range and therefore who hits the enemy first. Disengagement mechanics further encourage overkill because later in the game you will do better if you can hit them with massive damage immediately rather than smaller damage over time. That's just the way the stats rumble out. Ships like destroyers and cruisers fall out of effectiveness almost immediately. The point defense niche of destroyers is not very valuable, and almost anything a cruiser can do, a battleship can do better. Command limits don't really do their intended jobs, and doom stacks aren't fun. The last two of those, the command limit and doom stack issues, are outside the scope for this round of changes, and they will be explored in future updates. They're also, this is the devs, not really touching repeatable technologies at this time. They're instead focusing on trying to provide useful roles for more ship sizes. Now, there's an important question to be asked here, and that is, why are we having a combat rebalance? What could this combat rebalance prelude? What new DLC might we be getting? What might be coming with patch 3.7 next year around May or June that would require a combat rebalance? Just a thought to keep in your minds as we go further on into this dev diary, into these patch notes. I will elaborate a little more on that thought as we continue. So what did they actually do? Well, the biggest changes include ship roles can now be selected to auto-design ships that actually fulfill certain roles such as artillery, brawler, torpedo, and so on. If you do not possess any weapons that fulfill the selected role, it'll do its best with what you have. Torpedoes and other select weapons now gain a multiplicative damage bonus based on the size of the target. That means the larger the target is, the larger the hull is, the more damage they will do. So they will do more damage to a battleship than they will to a corvette. Missiles have been moved out of the G slot and they're now back into the S slot, or if they are a dispersal missile, an M slot. Energy torpedoes such as proton and neutron launchers have been changed back into G-class weapons with a minimum range. Damage has been adjusted to be balanced as a torpedo class weapon, and like the new torpedoes, they deal increased damage to larger targets. And for now, they do remain instant hit weapons. A new ship size called the Frigate, an advanced corvette frame that delivers torpedoes but is slower and less evasive, is now unlocked with the torpedo technology and available for all empires. They've added a minimum range to all large weapons except lasers. Note, currently ships do not yet back off if all weapons are unable to fire due to range. Strike craft no longer intercept missiles but will continue to fight each other. Flak batteries now more strongly counter strike craft, while point defense now more strongly counter missiles and torpedoes. Strike craft are more reliant on shields, missiles and torpedoes, and more reliant on armor. Due to their ability to bypass shields, strike craft are very effective against other strike craft. Ship combat computers now ignore certain weapons for desired range purposes, and base their desired distance on the actual loadout of the ship. Swarm and torpedo behavior will charge in, picket and line behaviors will attempt to stay at the range of their medium range weapons, and artillery and carriers will try to stay at the range of their longest range weapons. This generally increases the desire for ships to remain at range if possible. Ships now get a limited number of disengagement opportunities per combat. All current drives provide 1, except for psionic jump drives which provide 2. Once the ship hull takes damage below its disengagement threshold, so 50%, it will then start to try to use up these disengagement opportunities. The hit and run war doctrine grants all of your ships an additional attempt. Civilian ships set to evasive will continue to try to disengage after every single hit. Some sources of evasion have been replaced with other effects. Generally they are extra disengagement opportunities, and everything else has changed. Everything we know is wrong, panic and no despair. Alright, so now you actually have your hands on the beta. In order to get into it on Steam, basically go to Properties, go to Beta on Stellaris, and then change to opt-in to the open beta. It's available right now and will be available for at least another month before they possibly stop allowing it and then start pushing some of the changes into the live version. I'll now go through the patch notes to highlight the combat rebalancing elements that I haven't yet brought up, and bring up all of the interesting new things we're going to be getting. Torpedoes now have a maximum firing arc of 25 degrees. That actually means that they will have to rotate in order to shoot their weapons. However, given rotation is very easy in Stellaris, I can't see that really being an issue. Small weapons of any category now have a slightly faster fire rate or refire rate. Large weapons of any category now have a slightly slower fire rate. This means that smaller weapons should shoot more often and larger weapons shoot more slowly. They've added armor hardening and shield hardening modifiers which reduce armor and shield penetration. They've added new auxiliary components that use living metal or Zro to provide late game armor and shield hardening. Basically the way this hardening works is, let's say you have 3 modules that provide 75% shield hardening. A missile usually has 100% shield penetration. In this case, it would actually only allow 25% of that damage to go through and strike the armor. 75% would still be hitting the shield. They've changed the smaller rear sections of ships, the destroyer interceptor section, the cruiser gunship section, and the battleship broadside stern section to now all have an extra auxiliary slot, meaning you could choose to have smaller weapons and thus make your ships more tanky. They've re-included medium and large autocannons. They've also added new nanite autocannons and flat cannons as a reward for killing the scavenger bot. These are both higher tier weapons than we previously had. Jumping back to autocannons, the disruptors and autocannons are both now considered brawling weapons with short range but faster attacks. They've also buffed disruptor output quite significantly. They've given a massive rebalance to armor components, traditionally the worst components in the game given they were so expensive from an alloy perspective. In order to offset that, armor components now grant twice as much armor as before, meaning from a bang for your buck perspective, they're now on toe-to-toe with shields. Shield components grant 50% more than before, but regen remains the same, so sorry, they are slightly behind shields still, and the hull components, the crystal plating, now grant less than before. They're still very cheap, but they are less effective. I suspect they'll still be the meta, but we have yet to see. Hull technologies now give plus 10% hull instead. Armor and hull regen also now behaves like shields. It is 5 times faster outside of combat, so yes, they did nerf the regeneration components on our ships, except the regen values, because they made them 20% of what they were previously, but outside of combat, they're still exactly the same. I think overall that is quite a good change. They have increased the maximum range of all non-torpedo missiles whilst reducing the range of torpedoes. They've also chosen that XL weapons, that's kind of the things like your Giga Cannon, your Tachyon Lance, will now all be more likely to target battleships and Titans. Ships should now try to spread out a little further away from one another in combat, so everything should look quite a bit better, and it is no longer possible to kill a dragon by distracting it with a large fleet of transport ships. The final thing here is that the cap to force disparity bonus for fleets that are significantly outnumbered has been dramatically increased. This should mean that if you have a smaller fleet, you will find it much more easy and much more viable to deal with a much larger fleet. And also, if you have a properly tooled fleet that is a great counter for whatever you're fighting, you should easily be able to overwhelm an enemy even if they have, say, double the ships than you. We did see on stream recently that the devs completely lost to a Fallen Empire fleet due to the force disparity bonus included. And for those of you that don't know what the force disparity bonus is, basically it increases the, I want to say ship's fire rate, it might be the weapons, but I'm pretty sure it's the ship's fire rate of ships in a fleet based on the number of ships they have relative to the fleets they are fighting. So a small force fighting a large force will shoot more. They've increased the cap on this so you'll shoot more rather than less more. Bit of a Danish joke on that one, let me know if you understood it, but that's basically what they've done here with this disparity. Alright, we've got past all of the fleet combat rework stuff. You're now interested probably in the new features, some of the balance changes coming with patch 3.6. I imagine you're also massively interested in the new Federation type we're going to be getting our hands on. So, what are these new features? Well, they've added an archaeology site in a new solar system with a debris belt. I won't spoil that one, but you can go out and find it in the galaxy for yourself. They've added an Ascensionist civic for regular empires and equivalents for hives and machines that provide plus 25% planetary ascension effects and minus 10% costs. When we combine that with some of the other bonuses they've included for new planetary ascension effect increases, that could mean we could end up with an alloy world, a metallurgist ecumenopolis, which has 0 mineral upkeep and also has basically no empire sprawl. I haven't managed to do a deep dive in and try that out yet, but I will be looking into that very, very soon. They've added the new Holy Covenant Federation type and the Conclave Federation election type. Well, you probably want to know more about that. Let's dive in and find out all of these specific bonuses the new Holy Covenant Spiritualist Federation type will give us. So this new Spiritualist Federation type, the robotic empires in it may not become president of the Holy Covenant under normal circumstances. If there's only robots left in the Federation, then yes, they will become president, but otherwise they are completely unable to do so. The opening bonus here as well is, of course, very Spiritualist related. It's an increase to Unity. All members will gain plus 10% monthly Unity. And then when we get to level 2, we get 3 new bonuses. First is proselytizing envoys. A Federation modifier, envoys assigned to the Federation will now provide 50% more cohesion and increased spiritualist ethic attraction within our empire by 20%. This should make it easier than ever to maintain a full supermajority of spiritualist faction approval in your empire. And they're generally quite easy to make happy, so if you're going down the spiritualist path, this could be very useful from a happiness and unity output perspective. Promotion of culture. Our myriad of cultural identities is our strength. By promoting it, we will immeasurably increase our might. Planetary capitals now provide +1 culture workers, and this effect is doubled for system capital complexes. This is quite useful if you want to increase the number of culture workers you have in your empire, and given that Spiritualist Empire culture workers reduce the amenities usage of your pops, this could be really, really powerful indeed if you combine it with other culture worker jobs. And the final part of the level 2 for this federation, spread the holy word. The president gets voting strength on Divinity of Life resolutions at plus 25%. Now, generally speaking, the majority of the galactic community don't usually want to pass Divinity of Life, and the further resolutions on that chain, it can be very difficult. These are resolutions that are definitely beneficial to any spiritualist empires that don't have robots in sight. And so this bonus is a rather nice one. Overall, it's not massively important, but it's a nice little extra thing to have. And if you're enjoying this video, please form a holy covenant with that like button. When you get up to level 3, then you get some interesting extra bits and pieces. Ecclesiastical funding grants access to the Holy Covenant trade policy, which grants far greater unity conversion than the regular mercantile policies. This policy is actually a direct conversion. You're going to take your trade value and turn it into 50% energy and 50% unity, which is a phenomenal amount of extra unity. Heavenly Accord is another one of those planetary ascension effect modifiers that we can now stack. It's going to give all members plus 20% effectiveness from their planetary ascension levels. And last in the level 3 is In Pursuit of Ascension. The president gets a minus 20% to planetary ascension cost. And if you start making it up into the lofty levels of level 4, you'll be rewarded with the empowerment of the priestly classes. All members with Unity-focused colony designations will produce an extra +1 priest jobs per 25 pops. This can be further increased via planetary ascension. Now, I'm not entirely convinced this is amazing actually. You're not getting more efficient pops, you're not getting more efficient anything, you're just getting extra priest jobs per planet, which is nice, but generally speaking I would just build more building slots or use my building slots to build more buildings or upgrade those buildings if I needed more priest jobs. So it remains to be seen if this is actually very good. Saintly hierarchy means that your sacred nexuses and equivalent buildings provide +1 high priest jobs. Now, this is definitely quite a bit better because high priests are a much better version than regular priests, given they are part of the ruling class. They produce more amenities and more unity than regular priests, therefore giving them a higher level of pop efficiency. But overall, it's still not that powerful a bonus if I'm being honest. And finally, the most spicy perk of this level is the Shroud Delving. You'll now get a Shroud Delve cooldown reduction of 25%. This means the president, and I'm assuming you're going to be psionic as a president of the Holy Covenant Federation type, will be able to use the Shroud more often than regular empires. And now we get to level 5, and what has been very interesting to me so far is that in level 4 we didn't have any modifiers that had anything to do with the crisis at all, unlike all of the other Federation types. Going forwards, we actually still won't have that. So Union of Faith here, non-spiritualist, non-gestalt empires have bureaucratic buildings swapped for temples. Spiritualist empires gain +1 unity from priests. All empires face 30% slower robotic pop assembly, but do gain 15% extra organic pop growth. Overall, that is really, really good if you're a spiritualist empire. +1 unity from all of your priests, that's great. I hope it affects high priests as well. And extra pop growth is really good. And if you're spiritualist, you probably don't have robots, so you can completely ignore that reduction to robot pop assembly. Zro Catalysis unlocks the ability to use the Zro Catalysis Edict, which then lets you convert Zro into increased resource output. That could be really, really good. The final bonus here, which is president specific, is Reverent Edicts. This gives you +20% to your Edict fund as the president. Overall, the bonuses in this are definitely geared towards being a spiritualist unity producing empire. However, they really aren't, in my opinion, that amazing. Some of them really don't quite hit the mark. Extra Edict Fund is alright. It's equivalent to extra Unity in some ways, but, you know, where's the extra possible damage, possibly against robot empires? Maybe something like that might be interesting, or being able to use Zro to boost your weapons output of your ships. I don't know, something that possibly could make the Spiritualist Federation a better than just more unity. Because the Spiritualists are already really, really good at unity. It would be nice if the Holy Covenant Federation gave us some extra bonuses to improve things other than just our unity production. Alright, so that basically covers everything you could possibly want to know about the new Holy Covenant Federation type, the Spiritualist Federation. Diving back into the dev diary here, let's look through the patch notes and see what other features we're getting. They've added the Cordyceptic drone civic to hive minds, allowing them to reanimate all organic space fauna. In fact, with this civic, you'll actually start the game with 3 reanimated space amoeba, and as the game goes on, whenever you kill space fauna, you will get access to their corpses to fill your navies. They've added various new galaxy shapes, such as 3 and 6 arm spirals, and some more experimental and irregular galaxies. Galaxies now default to spiral 2-armed rather than elliptical, and tiny galaxies also support spiral 2-armed galaxies. They've added a new tradition tree politics to the Federation's DLC, which requires the galactic community to exist. These traditions empower those that are active in the galactic community, including giving council members new resolution options to propose, and we've already looked at that yesterday in a video that I did cover, but I'll link that video down in the description if you want more detail on the new politics tradition. They've also reworked the ascension paths from Utopia. Instead of requiring 2 ascension perks to be taken, each path is now a tradition tree unlocked by an ascension perk. The synthetic path, as you probably already know, is now split into cybernetic and synthetic paths, which in my opinion is a fantastic new change to have. Now let's move on to the general improvements. So, you will no longer get alerts from envoys dying, and the AI will now research debris. Apparently there was an issue before where it wasn't. The habitability planet icons in the system view can now be clicked just like on the galaxy map. They've also added planet revolt VO to the planetary revolt situation. They've added a planet automation setting which allows for construction even if there is a resource deficit. This is actually something I personally requested because I was getting very annoyed when the planetary automation wasn't building a building simply because I had low consumer goods, but I had a massive stockpile of consumer goods and I was happy building extra buildings, but the AI simply wouldn't do it. Now that has been changed. They've also changed how planetary automation is presented in the planet view to more clearly show that there are settings that the player can use. That's a great change actually. There have been some issues. I know when I made a video on planetary automation, I think it was back in August, a lot of people were surprised that you could right click and get automation settings for this planetary automation stuff. Planetary automation crime management will now forbid enforcer jobs if you have 0 crime and allow enforcer jobs if you have more than 27 crime. The tooltip for planetary automation designation setting now explains when it will create new jobs as well, so there is improvements there around the tooltips and around the way the game works. If you're enjoying this video and you'd like to support this channel, you can do so by following the affiliate link down in the description below and purchasing something from the Humble Bundle store. Until the 27th of November, you can get your hands on the RPG Legends Baldur's Gate and Beyond bundle for under €20 and lose yourself in some of the most immersive, beloved, legendary PC role-playing experiences of all time. And now we get into the realm of some spicy changes. Welcome to the balance changes. We've got a bunch of balance changes coming with 3.5.3. You should already have that. And some balance changes coming with 3.6. Let's look at 3.5.3 first. So, shared burdens now doubles the unity gain from the egalitarian faction. They've ensured consistency in the toxic god starting resources. The home system will now always contain a +3 alloy deposit, and a nearby system will contain another +2 alloy deposit and a further +6 energy, just so it isn't as random as it's been in the past. Federation subjects that cannot vote can no longer persuade Federation members that someone should not be invited into a Federation. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They have unfortunately nerfed Noxious into the dirt by capping the happiness bonus at 40%. This means that you can no longer have just one Noxious pop on a planet, and they provide all of the happiness needed as a ruler to offset the unhappiness of 0% happiness slaves. Boo. Vassals that leave an overlord's war by a change in the agreement will now get a truce with every opponent. That's a great change for multiplayer. Now strap your seatbelts in because this 3.6 balance pass is pretty large. Alright, so the fixable segments for the Shattered Ring origin can now be colonized from the start of the game, depending on the guaranteed habitable world setting of the game you're playing. Yes, that means if you have 2 guaranteed habitable worlds, those guaranteed habitables will be the other 2 ring segments, which are no longer broken, but instead shattered ring segments, just like your capital. However, those shattered ring worlds are no longer ideal worlds, but will have a base habitability of 100%, meaning that they can be reduced down to 0%, and they'll start off at 0% habitability because they'll have a bunch of blockers on them. There will be reduced cost and time to restore the shattered ring worlds by 25%. Repairing shattered ring segments now will also qualify you for the Galactic Wonders Ascension perk. The colonizable shattered ring segments have a large number of blockers, as I mentioned, including some that require advanced technology to clear, but impact the habitability of the segment. Colony designations on ring worlds now provide plus 10 pop growth and assembly speed, and this can be multiplied through planetary ascension. The default ring world designation also provides plus 15%. I assume that's 15% extra pop growth, but I'm not entirely sure, it might be both. They've also given Ecumenopolises something of a nerf to bring them up into line with Ringworlds a bit more. They'll now give plus 25% growth and assembly speed rather than just 50% growth and no assembly. That is both really good and in some ways a little annoying. I hope it's not just bioassembly, I hope it's both bio and robot assembly, in which case I don't think that's actually such a bad thing. Food processing centers, mineral purification hubs, energy nexuses, alloy nanoplants, civilian replica complexes, the auto-curating vault, the Citadel of Faith, corporate vault and alpha hub now have increased cost and upkeep on ringworlds, in exchange for providing the benefits normally given by their related orbiter ring building. So they'll give you extra bonuses because you can't build an orbiter ring on or around a ringworld segment. That is really good from a balance perspective. They've added an event on game start with the Common Ground origin to let you pick your Federation type. Yes, that's right, Common Ground will now get to pick their Federation type at the start of the game. The Mechanist origin now provides plus 15% robot assembly speed, really good, and plus 1 robot trait pick for when you unlock robo modding. The starting robots for the Mechanist origin now start with bulky and high maintenance traits, but they give a matching trait for whichever job they hold. Therefore, they'll also get bonuses to mineral and energy output, mineral and food output, I should say. The Mechanist origin now grants the robo-modding technology as a research option right from the start of the game. So they've basically given a bit of an improvement to Mechanist, though it's still lacking compared to the Bio-Ascension origin Overtuned or the Psionic Ascension origin Teachers of the Shroud. If a species cannot live on a planet, it is now the first to be purged from it. This closes a clone army exploit related to slowly purging other species instead of purging the clones first. It is now allowed for the galaxy to contain multiple Void Dweller empires, that's pretty great, and artificers no longer produce engineering research. That is sad, but it's still not enough of a nerf if they really want to get rid of Masterful Crafters as the main OP go-to civic for most biological builds. Efficient bureaucracy now grants bureaucrats, priests, managers, and death priests with Edict Fund production. And Pearl Divers have had their trade output reduced and their consumer goods output increased with a corresponding increase in food and mineral upkeep. That should mean that Anglers is slightly better than the current civic that we've had to deal with the last year. They have dramatically increased the absolute value of opinion modifiers. That should mean that when people hate you, they hate you more than they used to, and when they like you more than they used to, and that is simply for the base modifiers, for instance, when something happens during a first contact and that sort of thing. Speaking of first contact, they've increased the opinion modifiers granted from first contact and decreased the base rate at which they decay, and made the decay rate modified by improving or harming relations. They've increased the opinion penalty for undertaking Become the Crisis as well. Maximum opinion from improved relations has been increased all the way up to plus 150, and the minimum opinion from harm relations has been decreased down to minus 150. This is an extra 50 from the 100 or minus 100 values we've been used to. Only xenophobes are now happy if the Caravaneers are destroyed, and opinion modifiers from the Galactic Imperium interactions now have their decay rate affected by improving and harming relations. Overall, this should mean some of the improving and harming relation modifiers are important outside of just getting to 100, or in this case now 150, and then ignoring it after that. They've refactored the opinion modifiers from Galactic Imperium as well. Xenophile, pacifist, and corporate empires are also upset now if the Caravaneers are destroyed, and that makes a lot of sense. They've improved the Federation experience, and what I mean by that is the experience of gaining experience, by allowing you to have 2,000 experience above what is required for level 5. This means that level 5 Federations with AIs are no longer one of the most fragile configurations known to man, as they generally tend to get negative cohesion, then suddenly they drop below level 5 for a while before they move back up again. They've increased the time it takes to do first contact with other civilizations by about 30%, thereby slowing down the early game a little bit, and I'm actually in favor of that change. Logic Engine's trait is now allowed on droids as well, meaning you can start improving the research output of your droid pops. Here is a change that I think a lot of people who hate the current meta are going to be in favor with. I like it. I don't think it quite goes far enough. Actually, I think aquatic should be 3 points, but the aquatic trait will now cost 2 points. That is really good. That means that you can no longer just have a single point trait, giving you the effects of about 4 or 5 points worth of traits on ocean worlds. The Imperialist and Supremacist factions will now be pleased forever if you defeat a Leviathan, not just for about 20 years. I mean, there's only a finite number of Leviathans in the game, this makes a bit of sense. They're also a bit less selective about which Leviathans they are pleased when you kill them. The list has been updated for those added since Leviathan's DLC. They've reduced governing ethics attraction of newly conquered pops, and several factions now care about the type of federation you are in, if it is one attached to a particular ethic, for example. So if you are a Spiritualist faction, you'll be happy if your empire is in the Spiritualist Federation Type. Subjects that are not disloyal will now gain ethics attraction corresponding to their overlord's ethics. This was already the case for spiritualism, and now it is the case for all ethics. The Imperialist faction will now care about how much of your fleet you are using, and a large number of tweaks to the ethics assignment weights have been done. This includes making certain weights based on diplomacy with empires of a particular ethos have an impact that is more dependent on the number of empires you're engaged with in such diplomacy with. So if you have diplomatic relations with 10 empires and 5 of them you have a defensive pact with, I'm pulling numbers out of my head here, but only one of them is Spiritualist, therefore the Spiritualist Empire attraction you should be getting from the interaction should be reduced because only 20% of the empires you have interactions with are actually Spiritualist. And if you're an authoritarian empire, you will no longer be boosting egalitarianism in your empire if you give your pops good living standards. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You're authoritarian, you make their lives better, and they go, you know what? I hate the government. They've made my life so great. I mean, that doesn't really make sense. They finally added some extra weights based on the job the pop is actively working, e.g. priests, nobles, or soldiers. That is pretty cool. I'm hoping we might be going somewhere in the direction of Victoria 3 in the way that you might get some ethics attraction based on the pop role or job you have there. Occupied planets no longer produce or consume resources from buildings or pops. This is a massive change, particularly to multiplayer, where at the moment it was currently better to bombard a planet to 100% devastation rather than actually invade it if you wanted to deny the owner access to the resources that planet consumes. This also means that now if you lose a planet in a war, if let's say it's your primary food producing world or your primary consumer good world, that is a massive problem and you will no longer be able to continue the fight. And it also makes a lot more sense thematically. I am a massive fan of this change. They've rebalanced the harmony, prosperity, mercantile, versatility, and adaptability traditions. Again, if you want more details on that, check out the link down in the description below to the changes to traditions coming soon. They have slightly increased the chance of having a unique first contact event chain. I don't know what that event chain is actually, I'm quite intrigued by that single line. Special endgame crisis factions such as Aberrant, Cybrex, and Sentinels now show up a bit earlier on large galaxy maps. The Cybrex and Sentinel factions now scale to a limited degree based on the setting for endgame crisis difficulty, i.e. their difficulty equals the square root of crisis difficulty, so a 25 times crisis should end up with a 5 times Sentinel fleet showing up. That still shouldn't solve it, but it should go some way towards meaning that the Sentinels are actually useful in these larger engagement types. Splinter Hive holdings now require at least 30 pops present on the subject planet in order to be constructed. they've tweaked the galactic market location formula to far more strongly favor trade value in its criteria. At the moment, some people, and myself would probably be included in this, feel that trade value weighting when you are trying to go for the galactic market hub isn't strong enough. I've seen too many guessed out consciousness empires get their hands on the galactic market hub when they don't even produce trade value, and that is, to me, completely bonkers. You can now once again apply species templates that would remove beneficial traits so long as you are able to make the template as a valid combination in the first place. Okay, so I assume that means that you can now apply, you can get rid of beneficial traits before unlocking genetic ascension. That's what I'm assuming. The Zro distillation technology no longer explicitly requires psionic theory, but it is extremely rare without it. Chemical bliss also no longer states that it causes unemployed pops to produce unity, because it doesn't. I noticed that in my recent playthrough. It's a carryover from the socialism living standard. I forget what it's called all of a sudden, but the socialism living standard gives you unity, not chemical bliss. And they finally updated the tooltip. Huzzah! The Koth Redacted now has an acidic gland dealing 12.25% hull damage per day to all ships in the same system. This does not apply to the player-controlled variant. Now, I'm going to assume this means the Toxic God. If it doesn't, I'm very confused and very interested, but that is my assumption. Further than that, there are a bunch of changes to performance and stability, a few UI changes, and then a whole host of bug fixes and some changes for modders. If you want all of that information, I'm not going to include it in here. There will be a link to the full patch notes down in the description. Go check out that extra stuff if you are really interested in it. I will of course be diving into this open beta with open arms, so to speak, and I'll be looking at bringing you some new information on the ships, on the ship balance. I'll be doing some testing in the coming weeks. So we are going to be looking at which of the new ships are good, which things work against other ships, which classes work well against other classes, all of the changes, and where the meta might be with patch 3.6. So keep your eyes open for that one. I will be endeavoring to do that for you all. So what does all of this mean? Well, patch 3.6 is clearly the patch that is going to come out before the next big DLC, the next DLC that is equivalent to something like Overlord or Nemesis in the release schedule. So whatever we're getting in this current patch 3.6 is going to be the setup for what is coming next. Therefore, what are the big things we currently are getting here, and what could that indicate to us? Well, we're getting a combat rework. That could mean with patch 3.7 and the new DLC we'll be getting, there could be some sort of combat related systems that are going to be tying into that, and this new rework could be integral to that. On top of that, we're also getting some big changes here to some of the way that ascensions are working and how our empire functions internally. Based on those two things, I am thinking and somewhat hoping that the next DLC is either going to be something very combat focused, look back to Apocalypse, something like that we've had in the past, or possibly something more internal focused. Maybe we are finally getting an internal politics DLC. If you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to know more about the new tradition and the tradition's rebalance coming with patch 3.6 that has not been completely detailed in the patch notes today, click the video on screen now.